Hey there, Rational Head Screwed On Straight Shipper here, reaching out in a side video. I originally intended to do this as part of a larger video discussing Dean's relationships, and I already recorded it, but looking back, I sound pretty much like an auctioneer trying to fit this discussion into my 15-minute time limit while featuring everything else. The content can itself stand as its own video, so that's what we're going to do, and I'll just refer people here for the other video. In another video, I'll be discussing comparative canon relationships of Dean Winchester on anyone other than one-hit wonder waitresses. I'll even talk one-hit wonder episodical interests. Ultimately, the formula boils down to the simple resolution that, of the wealth of early season love interest, they stop presenting those after season 5 until season 11, at which point we begin discussing romantic framework of Destiel. I'm going to begin with something that's actually going to trigger some Psycho Wing Destiel shippers, and that's that season 4 to 5 had no room to throw shit fits over Destiel, and that anyone that supports seasons 1 to 5 as strict canon without engaging in other seasons has every right to support Lisa as Dean's one true pairing, as boring as it was. The death threats that were sent to her actress are not okay, guys, and she was originally intended to be his ever after and apple pie life. She was his happy ending that otherwise he was never going to get. But season 4 to 5 were, in truth, in perspective to anything related to Castiel, the tale of an extraterrestrial life form learning to cope with and understanding humanity and being utterly fascinated by the one he was bound to. While the fell for you trope is certainly in play, it's completely possible to have a romantic character type without having what is necessarily a romance. There was no romance in play beyond like 5 for the future and quirky jokes, but the point is it's come beyond that. Even so, 5 for the future is at best an alternate universe and was extremely subtextual. All psycho teenagers catching up to the show need a reality check on what Castiel's motivations were, and QED, it was not in Dean's pants. Season 6 is not my favorite season for reasons I address in just about every other video, but it's canon, so we're going to go after it. Cass does a stupid thing to try not to pull Dean from his apple pie life with Lisa, ends up dead, rebooted as Emmanuel, and sent to purgatory with Dean. At this point, it's still reasonable to indicate this is not necessarily a romantic framework as much as the tale of a soldier being dedicated to his band of brothers, which is fair. Extract talk of chemistry and heartfelt staring, and look at this on a story level. At this point, as discussed in another video, Dean has given up most of his old rambunctious lifestyle and retires himself to his dedication to his brothers. Season 7 did tread dangerously close to excessive romance with the reintroduction of Castiel as Emmanuel in the original script, but it never made it to the screen because even Misha was like, wow, this is way too gay. Shipper or not, I do believe they did the right thing, and I suggest shippers and anti-shippers both check the panel interview about what was written when Dean returned Castiel's trench coat and why they didn't do it for a reality check to both sides of the shipping fandom. It's pretty educational. What we move on to now is season 8, Dean tormented by a shadow of Castiel he couldn't save, parallel to Sam and Jess, right down to the same music playing as he passes by the specter on the road. It's difficult but possible to argue that it was intentional romantic framework because it was considerably more subtle than the original script of the Born Again identity. But the brainwashing, the begging, the I love you changed to I need you, again, shipper or not, the actor's reasoning was fantastic and does nothing to underscore Destiel in any measure. And I do feel they did the right thing. Again, that's something you can look into if you choose to check it out. Season 8 may have been excusable as incidental romantic framework until season 9, with Castiel surrendering all he has for Dean and called on it pretty much point blank. This is a story, Neil, full of love and heartbreak and love. He's in love with humanity. I mean, you draped yourself in the flight of heaven, but it was all about saving one human, wasn't it? We can forego cropped script elements in this era that never made it to screen, but were written and developed, such as Naked Deans in Castiel's Faux Heaven. You can look that up. But what we can't remove is the fact that during this time and their time apart, coming back together, Carver explicitly directed Misha to play Castiel feeling like a jilted lover, quote, so that's what we played there. At this point on a production level, the romantic framework is intentional. One is being intentionally friggin' obtuse if you're ignoring screenplay, screen time, text, subtext, and the producer vocalized intention. Carver continued to lead season 10 and maintained the path through the Mark of Cain saga. Honestly, any discussion about this does itself require its own sub video. But for those of you who want the clips now, Demon Dean bromances around with Crowley on a dark path until spared, but still fighting the Mark, wherein Cain calls out, living his life in reverse. He lays out the past, present, and the future, with Destiel being seated in place of Cain's wife Colette, voiced as intentional by the authors. Parallels deepen with Abaddon and the Knights in place of Crowley, who Dean chooses Destiel over, just like Colette possessed by Abaddon, and so on ad infinitum. Classic romantic framework has now reached 3 years, 2 of which are now confirmed as completely intentional on a production level. This is where I tell anti-shippers to calm down before they get annoyed again, but the fact of it is, you can't tell shippers they're just insane whether or not the romance is actually physically culminated unless you feel like arguing with the producers. This was mapped out during a period they absolutely ceased providing Dean female romantic interest, a claim no other fringe canon relationship can afford, or fanon, or whatever you call it. For example, Wincest. They never stopped presenting interests for the play quotes of Wincest. I'm sorry. That's just reason. Instead, now they supplanted with larger arcs rotating around Destiel to the point that even Sam has turned into a bit of a wingman, a point I discussed in my anti-ship video that I see as a problem, actually. Relax, I'm not saying Dean and Cass are boning during this time. I'm just affording a rational point of view to the anti-shipper on why not all shippers are half-mad teenagers screaming, hormonal and screaming for personal validation. Season 11, we get Amara, and here's where things get interesting. I cover the unhealthy and controlling aspects of the relationship in another related video pending mutual release. It'll be about Dean's relationships, as I mentioned before. But due to the fact that it's pure compulsion, magic, and binding to bend Dean to her will, making Amara no different than a powerful Becky. Drugging a man to love you does not count. And I'm very glad they did not take this avenue with Dean Winchester, shipper or not, because emotional control and manipulation is in fact a form of domestic violence that men have to deal with frequently. And while we can argue that Cass and Dean do get physical with each other at different points, so that's unhealthy too, generally it's when they're under someone else's compulsion spell and or literally saving each other from making a choice that will destroy them. So, but back to Amara. Drugging a man to love you doesn't count, and the show actually proved that. Anti-shippers try to hold Amara as canon because they shared a kiss once, but despite all mystic effects, not only did Destiel's heart call to Dean, but Dean broke her supposedly impossible to end bond instead to call out in concern for Cass. Yet again, we fall into the framework of the last several seasons when Amara tanked, as any late season carved-in love interest when given to compete against a 3+ year setup with a main cast member. So what we have now is 4 years of increasing romantic framework with intentional production guidance. Season 12 rolled around as a chaotic mess of not knowing what to do with it anymore, violently shifting between married couple, no homo, mixtapes, bromance, and breakups. The real reason behind these damages is covered in my anti-ship video, and it falls down to a struggling production team and ratings. You can actually go and view that video if you want the real analysis on why our entire fandom is at where it's at. The real question is, with the list of canon romances, which will be reviewed in a partner video, how many actually reach physical culmination? And of those that don't, why can they be considered romance when Destiel isn't? Why are Destiel shippers, that are given intentional seasons of screen time considered insane for supporting a physically unculminated romance? Is it because Dean has seemed aggressively heterosexual historically? Because if you check my videos engaging in comments of On the Road, Kripke himself admitted to basing him on Dee Moriarty and Sam on Sal. Sorry, Wincest shippers, Dean and Sal never did the do, but Dean and Carlo did. Either way, it breaks into the bisexual foundation of Dean. But not all romance ends in ripping off pants unless you feel like going back in time and educating Shakespeare. So, what here is really ruining anything about anything for anyone? Unculminated romances can only be considered canon if they're heterosexual, but it's mania to imply a homosexual one with the same lead in or more lead in than straight characters. Because I think you guys need to look at the history of subtext in film for homosexual pairings. Also, not the point of this video. There's another channel, Are They Gay? Which I don't agree with everything they post, but they do have a great Are They Gay? The History of Subtext in Films, which shows why homosexual pairings, even to this day, despite a change in the regulations, still struggle through this same form of filtering. Go ahead, people can choose to educate themselves. But there's some severe gerrymandering going on in the lines of what people consider canon here. If you feel I'm in any way being inaccurate of my presentation of this, I invite you to view my anti-Destiel logical challenge video and argue points against the production staff. If anyone manages that, I'd love to hold a healthy adult discussion about it in a film format so people can actually view a debate of well-formulated points and counterpoints. I don't care if you're a Dina straight bro or a Winchester or whatever it is. If you can take those 10 points, argue them without severe mental gymnastics, and answer them in full, I would be happy to hold a real discussion with you. And now, as this video towards 12 minutes, I'm very glad I split this into another video, and that will clear up a lot of time for the other discussion I intend to re-record, because it's something that really needs to be recorded if we're going to review the romances on the show. That said, signing off. Peace.